Hi, I'm Lynn.
And I'm Amanda, and this is the Pursuit of Badasserie, the podcast.
This podcast is all about taking action and creating that badass business abundance and life that you want.
Where we share stories, laughs, wins, and epic fails to show you the whole picture of the entrepreneurial journey.
It's not just unicorns and rainbows, people.
Jump on and follow us through this raw and witty roller coaster,
where we get down and dirty and go behind the scenes of life and entrepreneurship.
Get on it,
get over it,
and get after it.
Hey, I'm Lynn.
And I'm Amanda. Welcome to the Pursuit of Badasserie, the podcast. We are back again, and we are going to talk about something that is in some ways controversial for some people and not fun for many people. I actually find it liberating to do so, but that I'm weird. So we're talking about shedding that which does not serve us. And there are a lot of occasions in business ownership that you are going to experience this if you have not already.
No, absolutely. And I know we wrote about this in our first book, a certain aspect of it, loving them from afar. And yeah, Amanda and I were having a conversation around like what, we always are talking about, we have an ongoing log of like all the podcasts we could talk about. And the reason why we're doing this is because this is my birthday month. September is my birthday month. And every birthday, I make it a habit to like, I do it in the beginning of every year as well, but every birthday I make it a habit to like really analyze what's around me more on my personal side. And then usually the first of the year is like business and like kind of like moving forward. But there is such an importance of like really looking at the company that you keep, the things that are in your processes, and in just like all the clutter. It's kind of like spring cleaning, if you would. It's kind of like time to take a look and say, okay, what's working? Why is it working? Do I need to recategorize this particular thing? And we'll give you some examples in a second, and move forward from it. And I think especially because of the birthday, and actually I heard it was millionaire something, Rachel, I could see her, but it's in her book, and a woman came on. I remember listening to audio, and she does the same thing. And I was like, somebody else does this? Like they analyze all the people in their life every birthday to like see who's a part of like their inner circle and going to help them on that next layer, because it's important. We're all growing. And if we stay in the same environment, what happens? We constrict our growth. Right? Think of that. Like when you buy a lizard or a fish, like some will expand, or I don't know, even plants, they will only grow to their environment capacity. Right? And it's just really important for us to do a reality check.
Yes. And I know you like to do it because it's your birthday month. I like to do it in Q4 because to me, I mean, we can all have our own opinion of New Year's and New Year's resolutions. I personally am not a New Year's resolution kind of gal. I'm more of a goal setter, and that's, I know it's sort of like semantics, but potato. Anyway, the point is, I usually look at Q4 as an opportunity to assess what's weighing me down as I go into the new year. So sometimes that's people, sometimes that's my own personal habits, sometimes it's, it could be a number of things. It's a system, a strategy that I put in place that isn't really quite working, something that I need to revamp. Maybe it's a branding choice. Maybe it's somebody in my team isn't meshing and we need to reevaluate that. There are a lot of things that go into that, but I always approach my new year with this idea that I'm going to do better than I did the last year in my business. And better can be many things for many people. And that's what goals are for. We set our goals. We decide what's going to be better for us that year. So I often think about this same concept as part of my Q4 end of the year. I'm doing stuff for my accountant. I'm doing stuff for my CPA. I'm doing stuff for everybody. And I always want to take a look at what is serving me in my business and life, and what can I change or control, if you want to use another word for it, control and what's out of my control. There are ways that you can literally look at that, and even a small change can have a big impact. So whether it's, if you're thinking from a person, like a person who's not serving you, it's cutting back a little bit of time with them. It's like a small change. It doesn't have to be just like murder them and bury them in the ground and then they're done. I mean,
do not advocate murder. Just
we do not advocate murder.
this is
That's
not
a different podcast.
It's a different podcast.
Different podcast. However, it's the small changes that you make. And so I usually use Q4, Lynn uses her birthday month, to reassess what's working, what's not, and what I can change, because a lot of those things that aren't working for me, it's me that I have to change, not the things. So sometimes it's a mindset shift. Sometimes it's the way I'm approaching a problem. Sometimes it's that it's a system I thought was going to work and it just isn't. So there's lots of things that go into that.
Absolutely. And actually, I do it both. So my birthday, I'll do a lot of like more personal, kind of like the people aspect, and just like where I'm personally at in my life. And then Q4 January, I'm doing like business aspect. But also it's interesting because I don't know why I didn't think about this before, but back in the day, especially when my kids were like, I had my kids underneath my roof, like I would also do it in the spring, and it was more about like the house and the environment. And so, and I do consult people around this as well. It's just the whole idea of this is we need to have a point or several points in our year that we are analyzing what is around us, the people that we keep. Okay. So are they serving us? Is it a two-way street? What's the purpose of it? Do I need to recategorize or recalibrate the dynamic between us? Right? Do I need to take a step back? Do I need to move forward? Do I need to completely love them from afar? Same thing with, I see you smirking. I know we go through this, like, we talk about this all the time, but also in business, it's interesting because we obviously, you know, that Amanda and I talk a lot about sales. We consult around people's sales process. We're hired all the time to dive into people's sales processes or help them create them, and help them expedite them, right? And like really like apply them. And a lot of times you'll hear us talk about like the sales process, and the reason why a once well-defined, well ROI'd sales process, when it was working, is no longer working. It's because they've cluttered it with all of this crap. They've added in things that don't make sense anymore. And it's really about stripping away all of that no longer serves, all of the distractions and the mess, to get back to the core essence of what it is. So again, this like evaluation isn't always about throwing things out. You know, it's not always about the spring cleaning and like getting rid of. It really can be redefining the agreement. It could be recalibrating what it is. One more thing, and I'm going to turn it back to you, is like, I definitely do this, especially when I was like heavy networking, but I still do it every January. I'll look at all the events that I go to, the networks that I belong to. And, you know, there have been some like that I'm participating in, and I was getting frustrated. So it's also like me checking in with myself to say, okay, like, what are my feelings in this? Like, how am I? And essentially I found myself getting into modes of like feeling a bit of resentment because I was going to it to get business, but I really wasn't receiving business. So obviously being introspective, like, what am I doing? What can I correct? But it was also like, are they my target audience? And if not, how can I recalibrate? Is it still purposeful for me to go? Absolutely, because I want to give back to the community. I want to still participate. So I had to redefine and recalibrate my own beliefs around it. And it helped me show up better. It helped me show up differently and be more fulfilled and be able to give more in the way that they needed me to give more. So this like assessing of what is, and then kind of like sloughing off what no longer serves, and then recalibrating is like, it is so essential.
And I love that example because it's a lot of like some of the mindset shifts that I make myself. And so when I say about like, you got to look at yourself first,
Yes.
Often I'm the problem. So, and a lot of times it's a mindset shift, not because I necessarily have a negative mindset about it. Just like with your networking scenario, you knew that it was something that was supposed to be a business builder, but then you shifted how it was a business builder and more about the community and understanding and recognizing that you may have just been approaching it from a slightly incorrect angle for what your real goal for that was. And so a mindset shift isn't necessarily like, oh, I was thinking it was bad, but now I'm thinking it's good. Like, that's not what we're talking about. It's that subtle shift in how you perceive what you're doing and how you perceive the purpose of what you're doing and the benefit you're going to get out of it. So I'll give you another example of, I'm guilty of this. I will admit that this is not a client that did it. This is me who did it. I was trying to create a stronger team dynamic. And so I had changed a system that I had put in place to make it more palatable for my team who were a different behavioral style than me. So all of my team, and you can smirk all you want now, you can smirk because you know exactly what I'm talking about. So I am for those of you who are familiar with the DISC assessment, I'm a very high D. I very rarely have anything else in my wheelhouse there. And my entire team, like all but like one, were nurturers. And even that one other person was an examiner. They weren't even a D. So everybody was the exact opposite of me in 90% of the way. So I changed a system in order to try to make it better for them. And in doing so, I made it way worse for me. However, I had to understand that the purpose of changing that wasn't so that I would feel good about a system. It was so that my team would feel good about the system. And so even though it bothered me and it drove me insane, and I was like, I think this is the wrong choice and I hate this system and I want to change it back, the purpose of that shift was not for me and my belief in the system working. It was making them get on, not making, but helping them get more aligned with the values and the core feeling behind the business in a way that felt good and natural to them. So it felt completely wrong and not natural to me at all because it wasn't. That didn't make it wrong. It just meant I was making sure I was taking care of my team in a way they wanted to be taken care of. So it felt wrong to me, but I had to shift my mindset because it felt wrong to me because that's not how I communicate, but it's how my whole team communicated, and things did improve.
Absolutely.
I mean, it took me a while to be okay with it because everybody who's been listening to the show knows I'm a control freak. I admit that. And because I was opposite behavioral style from my entire team, it took me a while to get on board with my own plan. It was my own plan. Like, I put these action steps in place, and I had a hard time getting on board with my own plan. However, ultimately it was the mindset shift that I had to make because it was what was right for my team and my company.
Well, it was better for the whole, right? To help you grow. And I think that is like, and I know we talked about this in a recent podcast that were just recorded, is like, we're not stagnant. We're always growing. There's always things changing. Now, I say this with like generalization because there are some people who do stay a little bit more stagnant than others, and that's on you, not my people. But we're all growing, and we're learning new things. And so what once served us, what once was the right kind of dynamic for us, might not be the right dynamic or serve us in the same way in the next year, or in the next level, or in the next phase of life. And I think that unless you can actually look at it, have a conversation with it, and then really redefine what that looks like moving forward, you're actually, you can be hurting each other. And, we're talking about people as well. So even if we're looking at it from a friendship point of view, or even like relationships, like partners and things like that's where a lot of friction can happen, is because they're not having the conversations of like where they're at in their growth and their needs, and like reevaluating that. And I'm not saying get a divorce if you're not in alignment anymore. I'm saying like with the people in like your network and stuff, like if if it is holding you back, and not because you're doing anything wrong, it's just that they're not the right solution. They're not the right puzzle piece for you're trying to put a puzzle piece in and keep a puzzle piece in that has morphed and changed into a different shape and size. You play with them differently. You have a different dynamic, and we tend to keep people in the same box and that same puzzle piece, even though they've outgrown it, or we've outgrown it, or the puzzle's changed completely. We continue to, because it's human nature. And so what we're telling you here is like, you need to take a look, not just in the processes, not just in the people and everything around you, to say, okay, is this serving me anymore? If not, is it like serving them? Is it still important to me? And especially with relationships, like I strongly suggest you have a conversation with them before you like cut them off, unless it's like really toxic. But just like to say, hey, like, I was expecting this, or I've been like having a conversation, or this no longer like fits me. Can we move this dynamic, whatever that is? And I know that that's probably hard for a lot of people, having the conversation with the individual, but Amanda and I talk about it all the time with each other. We're like, okay, this no longer feels right. Can we move? I mean, we're a partner. Can we move together in this direction? Right. And so, and we're in alignment, we're in agreement, right? But we're even doing it within our like business agreement. Is like, okay, what do we need to slough off? What do we need to double down on? What doesn't feel right to the both of us? Because it's still, and going back to Amanda's example, is like, even though it felt inauthentic to her behavioral style, she knew that it was right for the greater good. And once she can understand and wrap her mind around that, like, it helped her business move forward. And sometimes, like, it's not a one size fits all. Like, we have to figure out, especially when we have team members, like, how do we slough off what isn't serving us and make sure that we're putting back in the things that are going to help us move that next year, move the marker.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I want to also point out, and I know this is, to me, it's obviously a given. However, I want to make it very clear in case we didn't articulate it right. It's not just recognizing the things, you've got to actually do the work to slough that off, or to make the change, or to see it differently. And that's actually harder than just recognizing it. Sometimes it's actually the opposite. Sometimes just seeing it's the hard part. And then you're like, oh, obviously I need to get rid of this, which is where, I mean, we talked in our previous episode about reaching out to mentors and having the help. That's where a lot of times mentors can help you as well, because sometimes you don't see it. And then when it's pointed out to you, you're like, oh yeah, that was a red flag. And now I can move on. But often, for me at least, it's not recognizing that I need to make the change. It's actually doing it. Making the change is the hard part for me anyway. I can see all sorts of problems. That's never my, seeing the problem is never my problem. I think a lot of times you get stuck on worrying about what other people are going to think, and worrying about like, how's this going to affect other people? How's this going to make people perceive me? How am I going to be the wicked witch because I've done XYZ? People will push back. And particularly the more toxic they are, the more they're going to push back at you, because they want to latch on to your greatness. That people want your light around. They want to pull you into their darkness. So just know that that's probably the most woo-woo I think I've ever said in my life.
I was totally thinking the same thing. I was like, I'm so proud of her using woo-woo terminology. Look at her.
Wow. Folks, that was probably the most woo-woo statement.
History. That was awesome. I'm like, damn, girl. Anyway.
Wow. You wrote off on me, Lynn. Anyway, the point's lost now, because my revelation was that I just got real woo-woo for a second there. However, still stands true that often the hardest part is actually pulling away from that and recognizing that some of the most toxic things in your life, whether it's, a relationship or just a habit that's holding you back, are going to be the ones that are hardest to pull away from.
Oh, absolutely. And the only other thing that I would add to what you just said, which I'm so proud of you, is that, like, okay, so if we take the year analogy, like every birthday, I'm going to analyze the people around me. In that year, patterns and dynamics and like habits have been formed, right? Patterns, habits, and dynamics have been like kind of built and put on you. right? So think of it as like, if we use the spring cleaning analogy, over the years, like things build up, you accumulate stuff that no longer kind of serves, that might've been bright and shiny, but now it just kind of like holds space. And so you also have to navigate. So yeah, the action can be the more difficult part. However, it's also like really like not getting caught up in like some of the comfort of the patterns and the like what was, right? That dynamic. And you're like just making concessions, even though you know, even though you know it might not no longer serve you, or you might even kind of turn a blind eye. And you kind of mentioned it before, like having a mentor can kind of help with that. But it's like it is difficult sometimes, especially if we're not necessarily willing to like look at our part in it and take responsibility for it. And I'm a big person of this. So is Amanda. Like I put in a lot of introspective and self-work. The finger's always pointing back at me. What can I do? But it's hard. Like it is hard, but it's worth it. It's like coming out the other side and feeling like lighter. You don't have the weight that you once had, that the constriction, like you have a new understanding. And going back to Amanda's woo-woo analogy, like you shine brighter, because essentially you're like dusting off the dust. You're like, you're cleaning off the clutter. And I am not calling your friends clutter and dust. That is not what I'm saying on the personal side. I'm just saying like sometimes like we have to be able to like move things around so that way we can work and be at our optimal. Right?
Absolutely.
Wow.
Yes.
Oh my God.
You're never gonna
like forward that you used to woo. I can see it. You're like, damn, I can't believe.
I'm never gonna live it down. You're gonna like mention it for years now. Be like, remember that podcast where you got woo-woo for a second? Oh, folks.
So proud of you. So proud of you. So here's the thing. We're already at time. Like we would love to know like your input on this. Do you do this? Do you analyze like what's around you, and more than just once a year? Like, and again, in all aspects, do you analyze and kind of clear out the clutter, as we call, in your processes, in your people, in your business, in your everything, in your home, on your desk, in order to be able to move forward cleaner, with more clarity, with better direction, with more purpose? Like, do you do this already? And if so, like, we'd love to hear, like, what are some of your go-tos? Leave it in the comments, DM us.
We definitely want to hear it. Who else is a rage cleaner? I'm a rage cleaner, both physically and mentally, emotionally, rage cleaning. So we want to hear about your experiences in this and whether or not you do it. And if you don't, are you going to adopt this in your Q4? Are we going to start this shift towards cleaning up the clutter of your business and personal life to shine brighter?
Absolutely. Wait, before we get off, I have to share this funny story. It's like, you talk about a rage cleaner. So I'll give you a perspective story. So I am too. I'm OCD and a clean freak, just like Amanda, one of the many things we have in common. And my kids would have to Friday chores. That means they kind of almost spring clean when they were young. And we always kept a well-kept house. Like, even though their rooms were clean, they weren't as clean as what the rest of the house was. But every time we would have visitors, like after they would leave, we would like literally like clean the whole house. Not that our visitors were dirty or whatever, but it's just like resetting our home environment, because that's what this is about, this whole thing. And I can remember like time and time again, like we would sit down on the couch after everything, or like we'd go to our rooms, or like, you know, wash up or whatever after, like, and when I mean spring clean, sometimes the hands and knees, like scrubbing. Yes, I do love that. Taking everything out of the cabinet. Yeah, I do. We're kind of OCD like that. But then like the kids and I would sit as teenagers, we'd sit on the couch. Not always. So if my kids are listening, I know it wasn't always, but there were times where we'd look around, they'd be like, oh, it feels so good to have such a clean house and like feel brand new again. And like, when you were talking about that, like it totally reminded me of that. Like, it is so refreshing to be able to come to a place where you can breathe again. And that's what this podcast was about. So anywho, till next time.
All right. Get after it.
All right, everyone. It's not enough to just listen.
Now you've got to put it into action.
We are so excited to see what you do next.
If you enjoyed our show, please leave us a review on iTunes.
And to find out more about what we're doing, visit us at thepursuitofbadasserie.com.